Okay, same background. I missed an opportunity when it came to the summer mag and made telemarketing stories. And that is, I meant to, when the videos started rolling on those two, I meant to say, am I dressed any differently? Do you see anything different? And the observant would say, well, Phil, you're in a vest. I don't believe we've ever seen you in a sweater vest. And then it was my place to say, that's because in Larson, Schroeder and Associates, vesting was a big problem. Maybe not that funny. Now, that gets me to 12 years of working in 4 different things. And now I'm going to talk about my crowning glories, CFO services, at which I worked 13 years at one place. And I am very proud to say, which is also 30 years old. I started CFO services on April 1st of 1992. That happens to be April Fool's Day, and only because I'm a loser did I started on that day. Now, I'll tell the story here, but the conclusion is I was fond of saying and confident in saying, I don't know who's number 2, but I damn sure know who's number 1 in our little niche. CFO started out as basic management consulting, which means I would come into a business and help them improve in a myriad of ways. My experience by that point kind of ran the gamut. So I put CFO services in place to do CFO work for clients. And almost immediately I got work. And the first 3 cases I had, literally the first 3, all had missed an economic development program that the state of Nebraska had for companies that were growing. Now, I happen to know a lot about those economic development programs due to the fact when it was at May, we opened 6 new calling centers in Iowa and 1 in Denver. Me did everything in getting them up and running. Leased space, attracted employees, got managers, you name it. So one of the things that would happen, we went to small town telephone companies that had some kind of a university or a community college in their community. And the reason for the college thing was telemarketing is a complete burnout business. And we were outbound telemarketing, meaning we were making calls to people, asking them to buy things. Well, that's lousy work. You're hearing no all the dang time. So we would locate by a college because guess what? Every year they have a brand new crop of freshmen. And in those small towns, there were no other jobs. So they'd take these telemarketing jobs and do the best they could. So I'm in CFO services, brand new. First three cases have this economic development piece, and I turn on a dime and say, maybe this is the direction now to go. What was I good at when CFO services was all mine? Now, this turned into a long list, a list that was put together by someone who must be very egotistical. But a company doesn't survive for 30 years, let alone the first 13 I was there, without these things happening. So I have always been above average in both creative and structured thinking. Probably way above on both of them when you look at the kinds of things I've done and the variety. And that's one of those no brag, just fact. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about. IRS, I learned a ton about negotiating. I had a nose for weird issues like fraud. Larson Schroeder and Associates, they trusted a 28-year-old kid with opening their Omaha office, which was supposed to be the shining light of that firm. And I figured out not only am I getting screwed, everybody else is. I became managing partner of Summer Magnuson Dawson, 2 people to follow me around. I was doing all kinds of public speaking, seminars for money. I was writing all the time, primarily love poems. So the love poem thing, great example of creativity, and all the rest of it needed some structure. So CFO services started with a blank sheet of paper on our dining room table, like every new business idea does. You know, that's just the way it's done. I had many different service offering ideas. And by the way, I had several at the start. I had all of them in the years I was at CFO. We eventually had 500 clients that were small companies, and the state of Nebraska had 2 programs, one LB 270 for the small companies and another LB 775 for the big ones. Started with the small, 500 plus clients. Part of the deal we made with them was that we were able to come in for the next 5 years and update their information and get them more money, us more fees. Smart idea. Utilities in certain industries, mainly manufacturing, they did not have to pay sales tax on their utility bills. Well, once again, darn near nobody knew about that. We did like 700 of those cases. Farmers, when they bought equipment, didn't have to pay sales tax. Now you would think they would know that, or the implement dealer would know that. I don't know why, but they didn't. So they buy a $200,000 combine, they pay $10,000 of sales tax that they shouldn't have. I can get a refund of that sales tax and split the 10 grand with them. Literally didn't take an hour to do the work. Nice bit of lucrative work. Oh, so in one respect, I went from a generalist, the typical CPA type, to a specialist. I'm going to do very few things, but do them unlike anybody else. And therefore, if I had stayed with the management consulting, I would have done fine, but it's like the CPA business. You bill by the hour. Well, there are a limited number of hours in the year, and so it's a great income, a great way to make a buck, but it's capped. And it's almost impossible to make significantly more money a year out, 3 years, 5 years. Another thing I became good at, I drew up our contracts, our consulting agreements, with help from my attorney, Dan Smith. And Dan brought me a first draft, which was 2 pages long, single space, 12-point type, normal type size. And I said, that's not going to work. Too much stuff for them to read and think about. I took that 2-pager, cut it down to 1 page, 4 paragraphs, 14-point type, and I mean, a monkey could understand that contract. In over 2,000 total engagements in my 13 years, we only had 2 bad debts. And by bad debts, I'm talking companies that refuse to pay us. That ain't bad, 2 out of 2,000. As part of the contract, we had a document called a power of attorney. And a power of attorney lets you do something for somebody else. Okay? So our power of attorney gave us the ability to put our name on the refund claims, like Joe Blow Construction Company doing business as CFO services. And therefore, the checks from the state would come to us, and then we'd cut checks 50-50, one to the client, one to us. And they just had 2 places to sign off. Everything's done. We're in total control of that money. And today, this just hits me as weird. I don't recall any prospect, any client griping about or objecting to the power of attorney thing. Oh well. We worked, unlike the CPA or management consulting biz, we worked on what's called a contingent fee, which meant if we didn't find you money, you didn't owe us a nickel. We ate our time. But if we were successful, you owed us X percent of the money we found you. And that X went from excuse me, 25% to 33%, a third to 50%, a half, because nobody was balking at the 25, which means you're possibly underpriced. So I checked or tested it out at a third, no griping, moved it to 50, and thought only idiots would sign up for us getting more than they are. Okay, so that's another skill, simplifying that contract and some unique ideas in it. The work we did required all kinds of math to it, and I automated all of that stuff. I doubt you've heard of Excel, if the grandkids are listening to this. But it's a program that you can kind of make formulas work for you and pull everything together. I drew up all kinds of those. They're called templates. And they were various types of complexity. And not only did I put them together for doing the work for the clients, I had another batch of them for managing the company. And the people that are running CFO tell me they are still using a batch of those templates that I developed 30 years ago. Marketing, another thing I grew into. If you remember earlier, I talked at some point about I never made a sales call when I was a CPA. It was all referrals. Well, this was the complete opposite. Nobody knew who we were. And so we found prospects, we found clients by buying lists of company names and information. And we bought almost all of those lists from Dun & Bradstreet, and we had very specific things we were looking at in the businesses, in those prospects. When we got to that point, it was kind of shooting fish in a barrel. We could walk in and say, you have a horrifically high percentage chance that this is going to work for you. And if it doesn't, doesn't cost you a thing. Easiest sale on earth. Speaking of sales, obviously, I had no sales experience. So I read books, I watched videos, I talked to old CPA clients who were great at sales, and I learned how to sell. I put together a sales script, both for the people who would be in front of the prospects, the clients, getting them to say yes, and the people who set up the salesperson's appointments. So I hope I had learned enough about sales by that point, because I had to put these presentations together. Believe it or not, we made a sale on 80% of our appointments, which is a ridiculously high number. But our thing was so easy to say yes to, and my sales approach just kind of evolved, and literally true, I was never as happy about the 80% as I was bewildered by the 20% who didn't say yes. How could they not? But some would. Okay, here was a tough deal. It took the state 9 months to process our work. So when we started on day one, we had no cash in the company and no cash coming for 9 months. So we were making money on paper. An example, in a month we had $50,000 worth of revenues, fees, income, 50,000, and our expenses were 20,000. So eventually when that money came in, the 50,000 revenue minus 30,000 expense, we have 20,000 bucks of income. But it isn't cash income, it's coming. So cash flow was, it was an impossibility when we started. And I just had to convince somebody to fund our 9-month lag. And once it was funded, then there wasn't ever going to be another problem. We were making so much money so fast, we just had to get through that first 9 months. So, bear with me while I do some editing on the fly. So I had another former client, Doug Smith, had a nice advertising agency. I went to Doug, also a friend, and explained what's going on and showed him we're making money, we just don't have the cash. I need 50 grand. And he said, fine. I said, I'll pay you 25% interest. He looked at me and went, Phil, you don't have to do that. And I said, Doug, here's the deal. I'd pay you probably more than that to keep the ball rolling. It's worth it to me. And you are taking some level of risk. Not very high, but there is. So he gave me the 50,000. Then we burned through that 50. I went back to Doug and said, all right, would you do this? I don't need more of your money. What I need is for you to guarantee a $100,000 line of credit, which is at Mid-City Bank, Jim Fiddle. Line of credit means we can pull money out of that 100,000 that is available anytime we want. And Doug got 30% ownership in CFO services for his basically guaranteeing 100,000 bucks. I never touched that 100,000 line of credit. We, at about the right time the cash started coming in, we never had a cash flow problem again. But I didn't begrudge him the 30 because, again, it kept us rolling. We had a technical issue, something called contiguous property. Even I had no idea what that was when we started. And it threatened to close us, to put us out of business. And so I went to Doug and said, here's the risk, here's your reward. And he said, why don't you buy me out? So we did. Another thing I had to develop, it was my first exposure to customer relationship management software. And what that is a software program that would give you a little box to put client information in, name, address, phone, but in addition, all these little markers as to why they would be a good client. And I came up with something called groups within that software. And we could, again, just rifle shot these prospects. I was always good at keeping employees. It was good, fun work with incredible compensation. Starting pay for every single employee was higher than they were making ever in any job. And they earned something called variable compensation, which I think we'll talk about later. They had a retirement plan called a SEP-IRA, Simplified Employee Pension IRA. And unusual about it, I would pay into that 15% of whatever the wage was for the year. And unlike most retirement plans where you don't own it immediately, it vests over typically 5 years. So you're 20% owner of that money after year 1, 40, 60, etc. Except for the SEP-IRA, it had what was called cliff vesting. And that meant day one, that 15% it put into your account, it was yours. If you left, take it with you. Very few companies were doing that. Almost nobody was paying 100% of health insurance premiums. But I was. You're starting to see why people stayed. When things were really rocking and rolling, I bought a brand new Dodge Stealth sports car. Not for me. I garaged it, and every weekend, one employee would have use of that vehicle from Friday night to Sunday night, and it would rotate. It's your turn, now it's your turn, now it's your turn. Unusual little perk, but people ate that up. I took them on trips, which I will get into down the road. I bought everybody a Ford Explorer in like forest green, because green was the color of the ink on our letterhead to remind people of money. So, as a result, keeping employees became a no-brainer. And, we had people volunteering to come, obviously, because of everything good going on. 17 years after I have left, they have lost one of the employees who were there when I left, and he was a shitty, time-eating crud of an employee. He was terrible. And the guy who owns it now, Chad Denton, literally when this guy hit the door on his last day, Chad skipped down the hallway shouting in joy. Something else I was good at, speaking of employees, I hired only one CPA in all my years, all my hires. I just took people who I knew or referred to me or ran an ad, and I trained them what to do. This is the kind of work that a CPA would be the natural person to get hired. But I figured, hey, if I hire a CPA, they're going to come in knowing nothing like all the rest of these people. So there's no need for it. I hired relatives. Hold on a second here. The reason I'm looking, we're at the 30-minute mark, and I'm gonna shut it off and do another section, like right now.